The white envelope slid across the linen tablecloth, stopping right in front of my plate of untouched soup. "Please," my daughter-in-law's mother whispered, her lipstick barely moving. "Take this, and understand it's better if you don't come around so often, for everyone's sake." I stared at that envelope like it was a live thing, breathing on the table between us. My son lowered his eyes. No one met my gaze. My heart didn't just hurt, it folded in on itself. Before I go on, if stories like mine touch your heart even a little, please like this video and subscribe. It means more to me than you know, especially to an old woman whose story was never meant to be heard. My fingers trembled as I reached for the envelope. It felt thick, heavy. Money always does, even when wrapped in paper and shame. I could smell the perfume from my daughter-in-law's mother, jasmine and something sharp underneath, like arrogance. The restaurant buzzed around us with clinking glasses and soft laughter, but at our table, silence sat like a third parent. I remember thinking, so this is it. This is what they think I'm worth. An envelope. I lifted my eyes slowly. Across from me sat Nadia, my daughter-in-law's mother, wrapped in emerald silk and diamonds that caught the light every time she moved her wrist. Beside her, her husband Victor toyed with the stem of his wine glass, pretending to be interested in the label instead of the humiliation unfolding in front of him. And on my right, my son, Daniel, 35 years old, shoulders broad, tie knotted perfectly, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped near his ear. He looked like a little boy again, the one who used to hide behind the couch when neighbors argued. "Daniel," I said softly, "did you know about this?" He didn't answer. That hurt more than the envelope. Silence always cuts deeper than words. Inside my chest, something cracked. Not loudly, just a quiet, private sound only I could hear. They think you're a burden. They think you're desperate. They think you can be bought. I hadn't told my son about my salary, about the years I spent building a life he never had to question, about the decisions, the contracts, the long nights under fluorescent lights. To him, I was just mama from the office, a woman with tired shoes and a cheap handbag. And now his in-laws were trying to pay me to disappear. I placed my hand on the envelope and felt my own pulse beneath the paper. Slow, steady, old, but not weak. I smiled, a small, tired smile. They thought they were dealing with a poor, lonely woman who had nowhere else to go. They had no idea who was really sitting at that table. But that was only the beginning. To my son, I have always been simple. Not poor, not miserable, just simple. The woman who wore the same black coat every winter. The woman who cooked lentils and rice instead of ordering takeout. The woman who tucked away every spare note like it was made of glass. He saw my small apartment, my chipped mugs, my old curtains. He never saw the account statements I kept in a locked drawer. He never saw the titles with my name alone. He never saw the emails that began with "Dear Regional Director" instead of "Dear Madam." I used to leave home before sunrise, the skies still bruised with night. The hallway light in my building flickered as I locked the door, my footsteps echoing on the stairs. My hands always smelled of soap and coffee. I learned to walk fast, to think faster, to sit straighter in rooms full of men who thought I was just there to pour tea. I wasn't. Behind my quiet voice and secondhand clothes, I negotiated contracts that built skyscrapers. I signed off on budgets that could buy entire neighborhoods. Month after month, the company paid me more than most people dream of earning in a year, $40,000, every month, sometimes more. But I kept my life small on purpose. I grew up in a house where the sound of debt collectors at the door was louder than the evening news, where my mother cried into her pillow because the electricity had been cut again. I promised myself that if I ever had money, it would never own me. It would sit quietly in the background while I lived simply out front. So when Daniel was born and his father walked out before he could walk in, I made a choice.
I would give my son stability, not luxury, respect, not entitlement, a home full of love, not things. But somewhere along the way, he confused simplicity with lack. He married into a family that polished their lives like silver, everything shiny, everything for display. I met Nadia and Victor briefly before the wedding. Their eyes scanned me the way people scan price tags. Pleasant smiles, expensive clothes, questions that sounded kind but tasted like metal. What do you do? Do you own your apartment? Are you managing alone? Always that word, alone. Years passed. Daniel visited less. He was always busy, always rushing. When he did come, he would look around my living room as if seeing it for the first time, noticing the frayed armrest, the small television, the faded rug. "You should let me help you, Ma. You don't have to live like this." I would smile, pour him tea, and say, "I live exactly how I choose, Beta." He thought I was just being proud. He never understood I was being intentional. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. "Mama?" he said, his voice tight. "Nadia and Victor want to meet you properly. We booked a table at La Maison for Saturday. It's a very nice place. Please, try to come." I could hear what he didn't say. "Don't embarrass me." I held the phone between my ear and shoulder and stared at the peeling paint near the window. "Tell me, Daniel," I asked quietly, "what have you told them about me?" There was a pause, then a small, strangled laugh. "I said you work in an office, that you live modestly, that you're simple, but kind." Simple. Again. I felt something inside me go very, very still. "All right," I answered. "I'll be there." I hung up, walked to the small mirror in my hallway, and looked at the woman they thought I was. And right then, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to see a poor, fragile, lonely mother.
Saturday came dressed in gray. The sky was heavy, the kind of clouds that threatened rain but never commit. I woke up before my alarm, the room still dim, and sat on the edge of my bed with my hands in my lap. For a long time, I didn't move. "Are you really going to do this?" I asked my reflection on the wardrobe door. I thought of my son's voice, careful and strained. I thought of Nadia's eyes, always weighing, always measuring. I thought of the word simple echoing in my head like an insult wrapped as a compliment. Yes, I was going to do this. I opened my wardrobe and pushed aside the few good blouses I reserved for meetings. At the back hung a pale, shapeless dress I almost never wore outside the house. The fabric had faded under the sun where it dried on the balcony railings. The hem was uneven. It made me look smaller, older. Perfect. I pulled my hair back into a loose bun, letting a few strands fall out. No earrings, no necklace. The watch my company had given me for 20 years of service stayed in its box. On my feet, I slipped into scuffed flats that had seen too many rainy mornings. In the kitchen, I made tea and couldn't drink it. The steam rose and disappeared into the quiet, just like years of words I'd swallowed. When did he become ashamed of you? When did simplicity become something he apologized for? I folded an old canvas tote over my arm. Inside, my real life rested quietly. My wallet, my keys, my phone, and 2 cards that could have bought the restaurant twice over. I touched them for a second, feeling the sharp edge of the metal through the leather, then let the flap fall. On the way out, I locked my door and ran my fingers along the wood. This small apartment had seen homework spread over the table, feverish foreheads pressed to my palm, birthday cakes with crooked candles. It had seen grief and joy, and the quiet in between. A taxi dropped me in front of La Maison. Soft golden light glowed from inside. The air smelled of rain and truffle oil. A doorman in a crisp suit opened the door for me, his eyes politely blank as they swept over my dress.
My footsteps echoed on the marble floor. My heart kept pace. I saw them before they saw me. Daniel sitting a little too straight in his suit, Sarah, my daughter-in-law, in a cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and at the center of the table, like a throne, sat Nadia, in deep blue silk, and Victor in a perfectly pressed gray jacket. Their glasses were already full, their laughter faint and controlled. Sarah spotted me first. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mama?" Daniel said, standing up. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second when he saw my dress. I watched his gaze travel from my shoes to my bag, and there it was, the tiny shadow of embarrassment. It stung more than any slap. "Assalamu alaikum," I greeted softly. Nadia looked me over slowly, like she was scanning a receipt. Then she lifted the corners of her lips. "Wa alaikum salam," she replied. "So nice you could join us." No one moved to pull out my chair. I did it myself. The cushion sighed under my weight. I placed my bag carefully at my feet, feeling all their eyes on me, measuring, classifying, labeling. A waiter placed an elegant menu in my hands. The words were in French. My fingers traced the golden letters, pretending not to understand. "Do you need help?" Nadia asked, tone sugar sweet and knife sharp. I answered honestly. "Yes, I don't know what any of this means." She sighed just a little, just enough for me to hear. "I'll order something simple for you. We wouldn't want you to feel overwhelmed." My cheeks burned, but I smiled. Inside, another part of me awoke, the part that had spent decades in boardrooms where they misjudged me at first glance, the part that learned to let people underestimate her, the part that knew underestimation was a powerful weapon. What came next shattered everything I believed.
Saturday came dressed in gray. The sky was heavy, the kind of clouds that threatened rain but never commit. I woke up before my alarm, the room still dim, and sat on the edge of my bed with my hands in my lap. For a long time, I didn't move. "Are you really going to do this?" I asked my reflection on the wardrobe door. I thought of my son's voice, careful and strained. I thought of Nadia's eyes, always weighing, always measuring. I thought of the word simple, echoing in my head like an insult wrapped as a compliment. Yes, I was going to do this. I opened my wardrobe and pushed aside the few good blouses I reserved for meetings. At the back hung a pale, shapeless dress I almost never wore outside the house. The fabric had faded under the sun where it dried on the balcony railings. The hem was uneven. It made me look smaller, older. Perfect. I pulled my hair back into a loose bun, letting a few strands fall out. No earrings, no necklace. The watch my company had given me for 20 years of service stayed in its box. On my feet, I slipped into scuffed flats that had seen too many rainy mornings. In the kitchen, I made tea and couldn't drink it. The steam rose and disappeared into the quiet, just like years of words I'd swallowed. When did he become ashamed of you? When did simplicity become something he apologized for? The food arrived like bartwork, tiny portions on enormous plates, drizzles of sauce that looked like brushstrokes. My dish was the plainest, a small piece of chicken with a few roasted vegetables. "Something light," Nadia said, "easier to digest." "Thank you," I replied, even as the words tasted bitter. Around us, the restaurant hummed with gentle music and murmured conversations. Candle flames flickered in their glass holders. I watched the reflection of the fire dance over Nadia's rings as she lifted her wineglass. "This bottle," she said casually, "is from a vineyard in Italy. Very exclusive. $200, but when you know quality, you don't count." She slid her eyes to me, just for a second. I nodded slowly. "I've never had wine that expensive. I'm sure it's very refined." "Oh, you don't drink much, do you?" she asked. "Not often," I said. "My life has always been more tea
then whine. Victor chuckled quietly, the way people laugh at something that confirms what they already think. They talked of trips, of hotels where the curtains were silk and the bathrooms marble. They described business-class flights, resort breakfasts, limited edition watches. Their words filled the air, heavy with numbers and brands, as if their worth lived inside price tags. Nobody asked me how my week had been. Nobody asked if I was well. Nobody asked if I was lonely. Still, Nadia finally said, dabbing delicately at her lips with a napkin, "You live alone. Must be difficult at your age." I cut a carrot very carefully. "It has its quiet moments." "And your salary, it covers everything?" she continued, as if discussing the weather. "I know office work doesn't pay much these days." My fork wobbled in my hand. I steadied it. "I manage," I answered. "I don't need much." She leaned back, tilted her head, and smiled a smile full of pity and poison. "You're very brave, truly. Some women crumble when they're alone. But of course," she glanced at Daniel, "one always wishes one could give their child more growing up. Better schools, better opportunities. But we all do what we can, right?" The message landed between us like a stone. "I did more than you will ever know," I wanted to say, "in ways you would never understand." Instead, I simply nodded. "We all do what we can." She continued, "We made sure Sarah had the best: private schools, languages, travel. And when she and Daniel bought their house, we helped with the down payment, of course. $40,000. We gave it gladly. That's what parents do." Victor lifted his glass, proud. "We even paid for their honeymoon in Greece. 15,000. But who's counting, eh?" They were. Every cent, every gesture, every investment they could throw in our faces. My heart sank. All these years, I had let Daniel believe that a family friend had arranged a good mortgage for him. He never knew the transfer for that down payment had come from my account, through my lawyer, anonymously, quiet, deliberate. There, at that table, Nadia took credit for a sacrifice she had never made. She wore my silent gift like a crown. I felt my pulse in my throat. Should I speak? Should I stay silent? Still, Nadia continued, "We are worried. We don't want Daniel to feel pulled in too many directions. Newly married, responsibilities, work pressure, and then, of course, concern for you. Concern for me, the way you're concerned about a cracked tile ruining your perfect floor. We've been discussing a little idea, a way to help everyone." A waiter passed by, the scent of butter and garlic trailing behind him. My chest tightened. "A small monthly allowance," Nadia said, her smile widening. "Just something modest, 500, maybe 7, so you can have a more comfortable life without having Daniel to worry so much. And in return, you give them space. You don't call too often. You don't show up unannounced. You let them breathe." Daniel swallowed hard. His napkin twisted in his hands. My ears rang. For a moment, all I could hear was the slow, deliberate pounding of my own heart. They wanted to pay me to step aside. They wanted to put me on a little shelf, like an old photograph, visited on holidays. I set my fork down gently. My hands had stopped shaking. $500, I repeated, softly. To disappear. Nadia laughed, high and thin. "Oh, don't put it like that. It's just support. We help many people." I looked at my son. "Is this what you want, Daniel?" He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. Something inside me, something that had bent and bent for years, refused to bend anymore. I smoothed the napkin over my lap, the fabric soft beneath my fingers. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded different. steady, cold, older than my years. That is a very interesting proposal, Nadia, but before I answer, I have a few questions. But that was only the beginning. Nadia blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected questions, only gratitude, only compliance. Questions? She repeated, her smile tightening. Yes, I said, just to understand. I folded my hands on the table, the same way I did in boardrooms when men 3 times my salary waited for my verdict. Only here, I was supposed to be ignorant, desperate. How much did you say you contributed to the house? I asked. 40,000, she answered quickly. We wired it to Daniel directly. My son's eyes darted to me, then to his plate. And the honeymoon? 15,000, Victor added, puffing his chest. We wanted them to see the world, to start their life in beauty. So, I said slowly, $55,000 in total. Nadia's chin lifted. Yes, but again, who's counting? I was. Every syllable. Every lie. I leaned slightly forward. And in return for your $55,000, you believe you have the right to decide who is near your daughter, who is near my son, and when? Not frowned. We never said. You did. You just used softer words. You want to make sure I don't burden them, don't visit too often, don't call much. In short, that I'm out of sight, out of mind. Her lips parted. You're misinterpreting everything. Am I? I asked. My heart was beating hard, but my mind was suddenly very clear. Years of staying quiet had sharpened my hearing. I could hear every insult hidden behind concern. That small allowance you offered, how much exactly? Nadia looked at Victor. He shrugged. 500, maybe 7 if needed. So, I said, nodded. Your $40,000 bought you the illusion of control, and now you wish to rent my silence for $700 a month. Victor scoffed. This is getting dramatic. We're only trying to help you. I smiled softly. Help always feels different when it puts a leash around someone's neck. The candlelight flickered between us. A drop of wax slid down the side of the holder, thick and slow. Nadia's fingers tightened around her glass. With all respect, you should be thankful. Many women in your position don't have anyone. You have us. You have our concern. The word thankful sat sour on my tongue. I was thankful when my neighbor watched Daniel while I worked double shifts. I was thankful when the landlord gave me 1 extra week for rent. I was thankful when there was enough food for my son to eat twice, even if I didn't. This was not help. This was humiliation dressed in silk. I took a breath. The air felt heavy, thick with perfume and roasted garlic, and all the things left unsaid for too long. Daniel, I said quietly, do you think of me as a burden? His face crumbled, then smoothed again. No, Mama, of course not. I worry, and he faltered, they worry too. Worry or control? Silence stretched over the table, like a second tablecloth. I could feel their discomfort now, shifting in their seats, glancing at each other. That was the first crack, the first moment where they realized the woman they thought they could buy wasn't as pliable as they hoped. Still, they didn't know who I truly was. For 35 years, I had let my son believe I was just a tired office worker. For his sake, for his character, for his future. But watching him now, small in the shadow of his in-laws' wealth, apologizing for the woman who carried him through storms, I knew the time for silence was over. I picked up my water glass, took a slow sip, and set it down. The glass made a soft, decisive sound on the table. Nadia, I think there's something you should know before you decide how much my presence in my son's life is worth. I had no idea what truth was about to spill out of me.
For a moment, I almost didn't say it. Years of hiding don't vanish in a second. They cling to you. They whisper, stay small, stay quiet. They don't need to know. But humiliation has a way of burning through fear. Nadia, I began slowly, you've been very open tonight about your generosity, about the money you've spent, about what you believe you've given my son. I paused. My hands were steady now. It surprised me. So let me be open too. Do you know how much I earn every month? Nadia laughed softly. We don't need to know your finances. We only want what's best for 40,000, I said, cutting through her words like a knife through silk. The table went still. Even the candle flame seemed to freeze. Victor blinked. I'm sorry, what? $40,000, I repeated. Sometimes a bit more, with bonuses. Every month for almost 20 years. Daniel stared at me as if I'd spoken another language. Mama, what are you talking about? I looked at my son, my voice softening. The office you always imagined was a small one, huh? Some little desk in a crowded room? He nodded slowly, confused. I'm not a clerk, Beta. I'm a regional operations director. I manage 5 branches in 3 countries. I sign contracts that are worth more than the house you live in. People wait weeks for a half hour on my calendar. His lips parted. No sound came out. Nadia laughed again, but this time it was hollow. This is ridiculous. You expect us to believe you make more than a CEO? Believe what you like. My salary doesn't need your faith to exist. I reached down, pulled my canvas tote onto my lap, and opened it. The zipper rasped softly in the quiet. From inside, I took out a slim black card, heavy as a small stone. I placed it gently on the table between us. The candlelight slid over it, catching the silver letters of my name. Corporate card, I said. Company limit. No personal cap. I don't use it for show, only for work and emergencies. Nadia's eyes widened despite herself. Victor leaned forward. This could be fake, he muttered. I smiled. It could be. Or you could let the waiter test it when the bill comes. Daniel still hadn't moved. His fork lay forgotten beside his plate. Mama, why? Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't want you growing up expecting a cushion beneath you every time you fell. I wanted you to learn the value of effort, not the comfort of inheritance. I wanted you to build your own life, not live waiting for mine to rescue you. I turned back to Nadia. And that down payment you love to remind him of, the 40,000? Check the bank statements again. You wired it, yes, but where did that money come from? Her forehead creased. I sent it from a trust account to your account, quietly, long before you gifted it onward. My lawyer arranged it to protect Daniel's pride and yours. I let you wear my sacrifice like jewelry because I thought it didn't matter who got the credit as long as my son had a home. Daniel's chair scraped the floor as he jolted. What? His voice cracked on that single word. I met his eyes. Tears pricked mine, but I did not look away. You didn't think those mortgage terms just appeared, did you? I bought down the interest. I negotiated it myself. I've been helping you from the shadows for years. Not because you needed it, but because I could. Because a mother's job is to make sure the ground under her child's feet doesn't crumble. The color drained from Nadia's face. You're lying, she whispered. Call your bank. Ask where that 40,000 came from. They'll tell you the name of the originating account. It's mine. The restaurant seemed to fade around us. Chairs, clinking glasses, soft music, all blurred into the background. I used to want to give you $700 a month, I said quietly, to stay away from my own child. Meanwhile, I gave $55,000.
with no strings, no speeches, no conditions. I asked for nothing, not even recognition. I picked up the black card again, turning it once between my fingers. This is the difference between us, Nadia. You use money to control people, to remind them of what they owe you. I use it to free the people I love from fear. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me how calm I felt. I placed the card back on the table. I murmured, "When the bill comes, let me handle it. After all, that's what burdens do, right? We pay quietly."
The waiter arrived with the leather folder tucked neatly under his arm, his polite smile the same one he probably gave to 100 tables a night. "Shall I bring the check, sir?" he asked Victor. "Yes," Victor said quickly. "Of course." The folder returned a few minutes later and landed like a final judgment in the middle of the table. Victor pulled out his card with a flourish, gold, shiny, confident, and slipped it inside without even glancing at the total. Power loves to perform. The waiter vanished. I watched Nadia's fingers twisting her napkin, her knuckles paling. Daniel stared at the tablecloth as if it held answers. Sarah sat utterly still, her eyes glassy, mouth pressed into a thin line. The silence stretched, broken only by the murmur of other people's lives around us. A spoon clinked in a nearby coffee cup. Someone laughed at another table. Soft music played. I felt like I was sitting inside a snow globe, watching everything move around me while we stayed frozen. The waiter returned. His smile was gone. "I'm so sorry, sir. Your card was declined." The word hung there. Declined. Victor's head snapped up. "That's impossible. Run it again." "Of course." The waiter retreated, the folder clutched tightly in his hand. Nadia's face flushed deep red. "There must be some mistake. This never happens." Her diamond bracelet slid down her wrist as her hand shook. I took a breath so slow it hurt my ribs. The air tasted of roasted garlic and humiliation. Minutes ticked by. Then the waiter came back, a second merchant machine in his hands, as if the fault might be the device, not the plastic. "I tried twice," he said gently. "It was declined again. Do you have another card?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Of course I do," he snapped, pulling out a second card, then a third. Gold, platinum, names engraved like declarations. One by one, they slid into the folder. One by one, they returned, useless. "I'm very sorry, sir. They're all being rejected. It might be a security block. Sometimes banks do that when there's suspicious activity, especially during travel." Nadia's fingers flew to her phone. "I'll call the bank right now," she hissed. Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraped back with a screech that turned more than a few heads. "This is absurd," he barked. "We have more than enough." He stopped. The words tasted wrong even to him in that moment. Outside, the night wrapped around us like a thin shawl. A faint breeze carried the smell of rain on asphalt and car exhaust. People laughed as they passed the restaurant, arms linked, jackets pulled tight against the chill. Life went on as if my world hadn't just tilted. Daniel shoved his hands into his pockets, his shoulders hunched in a way that made him look 12 again. "Mama, why did you never tell me any of this?" We stood under the soft glow of a street lamp. Moths fluttered against the glass, always drawn to light, even when it burns. "What would it have changed?" I asked. His eyes filled. "Everything." I shook my head. "No, beta. You went to school. You studied. You worked. You paid your own bills. You learned to stand on your own feet. If you had known there was a second pair of feet, mine, always ready to catch you, would you have tried of hard?" He swallowed. "So you lied to me." The words cut, but I let them. Sometimes wounds must be opened before they can heal. "I hid things," I said quietly, "for what I believed was your good. I may have been wrong. I may have made mistakes. But nothing I did was from shame of you or of myself, only out of fear that money would change you into someone I wouldn't recognize." He stared at the ground. A taxi's headlights swept over us as it slowed. I raised my hand, and it stopped. 3 days passed. Rain traced thin silver lines down my window. I spent those days moving slowly through my little apartment, like someone learning to walk again. I washed dishes, swept the floor, watered the plant on my windowsill that had refused to die no matter how many times I forgot it. I replayed the dinner in my mind like a film I couldn't switch off. Every look, every sentence, every time I had bitten down on my tongue instead of answering. At night, the silence hummed loudly around me. I lay awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Was I too harsh? Should I have stayed small, quiet, simple? Did I protect my dignity at the cost of my son's peace? My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Daniel. "Mama, are you okay? Please answer. Sarah wants to come see you. She's been crying for days." I read them all and replied briefly. "I'm fine. I need time." "Not yet." On the third afternoon, while I was making tea, the bell rang. It wasn't Daniel's usual pattern. He always pressed twice, jittery. This was one long, hesitant chime. My heart skipped. The kettle whistled softly in the background as I walked to the door, wiping my damp hands on my apron. When I opened it, Sarah stood there. No makeup, no jewelry. Her hair, usually sleek and styled, was pulled back into a messy ponytail. She wore a plain sweater and jeans. She looked much younger like that, and very, very tired. She whispered. Her voice broke on the word. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. "Of course." She stepped into my little living room and looked around, as if seeing it properly for the first time. The old sofa, the small table scarred with years of plates and school books, the faded curtains that still held the smell of cooking. "It's warm," she said quietly. "Peaceful." I poured her tea and placed the cup in front of her. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around the ceramic. "I don't deserve this," she murmured. "Tea?" I asked gently. "Everyone deserves tea." She let out a small, choked laugh. Then the laughter turned to sobs, her shoulders shaking as she tried to hold herself together.
I sat down opposite her and waited. I've learned in life that some words have to spill on their own time. "I'm so sorry," she finally managed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "For that night, for all the nights, for every time I stood there and let them talk to you like that, for every time I said nothing." I watched her carefully. "Why did you say nothing, Sarah?" She stared into her tea. The steam curled up and disappeared. "Because that's what I've always done," she whispered. "My parents, they built everything from nothing. They remind me every day. They say I owe them my life, my education, my comfort. Every choice I make, they weigh against their sacrifices. We gave you this. We paid for that. We suffered so you could have..." She swallowed hard. "I grew up believing I was their investment, not their child. That I had to make them proud. That disagreeing with them was betrayal. So I learned to smile, to nod, to keep quiet, even when they were cruel." She raised her eyes to mine. There was shame there, and something else, a desperate, fragile hope. "That night," she said, "when they slid that envelope toward you, my stomach turned. I wanted to push it away. I wanted to scream, but I heard my mother's voice in my head. 'Don't you ever embarrass us, not in public.'" A tear slid down her cheek, leaving a clean track through the powder she hadn't bothered to wash off properly. "And when you spoke," she whispered, "when you finally told the truth, I felt like someone had opened a window in a house where I had been suffocating my whole life." The kettle clicked softly off behind us. A car horn honked outside. The world kept moving. "I'm not asking you to forgive my parents," Sarah said, voice trembling. "I don't know if I do. I want to be different from them. For Daniel, for myself, for any children we might have, I don't want to pass this sickness down." I leaned back slightly, studying her. "The sickness of what?" I asked. "Measuring people by money, by status, using love like a chain instead of shelter, believing that giving money gives you the right to control lives." I nodded slowly. The girl who had once greeted me with polite distance now sat here, cracked open. "Sarah," I said gently, "change doesn't come from perfect apologies. It comes from imperfect tries, over and over." Her lips trembled. "Will you let me try?" I held my lukewarm tea between my palms, feeling the last of its warmth seep into my skin.
I watched Sarah's lower lip quiver as she waited, bracing herself for rejection. That was what struck me most, how much she expected to be turned away. As if all she had ever known was conditional acceptance. "Tell me something honestly," I said. "If your parents had never been rich, would you still fear them this much?" She blinked. "Yes," she whispered. "Because their power never came from money alone. It came from guilt, from reminding me what they went through, from making me feel small in the shadow of their sacrifices." I nodded slowly. "Sacrifice can be a gift," I said, "or it can be a weapon. It depends on how you use it." I thought of nights spent sewing Daniel's school uniform back together, of days when my stomach growled, but I smiled anyway while he ate. I had never once told him, "Look what I gave up for you." I didn't want him to carry that weight. "Sarah," I said softly, "I will not pretend I'm not angry. I am. What your parents tried to do to me, to my relationship with my son, that wound is still raw. But you are not just an extension of them. You're your own person. You get to choose who you become." She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. "I want to choose better.
For Daniel. For us. When we left the restaurant that night, we fought. All four of us. My mother screaming, my father threatening to cut us off, Daniel shaking with rage, and me, caught in the middle, like always. But for the first time, I didn't just stand there. I told them they were wrong. Her hands shook around the teacup. I told them they had humiliated you, that they treated you like trash because they thought you were poor, and that their mistake wasn't misjudging your money. It was misjudging your worth. I couldn't help it. A small, proud smile tugged at my mouth. What did they say? They said I was ungrateful, that I'd let you poison them against me. My father said he would reconsider his will. My mother cried and said I was killing her. It was messy. I winced. Emotional blackmail is louder than a slap. And what did you do? She looked at me straight, her eyes suddenly steady. I chose Daniel, she said simply, and I chose myself. I told them I loved them, but I wouldn't let them control us with money anymore. If they wanted to be part of our lives, it would have to be without all the strings. And if they don't? Her voice cracked. Then at least my children will know one kind grandmother who loves them without counting receipts. Something inside me softened then, like ice thawing after a long, brutal winter. Your children will have more than one kind grandparent if you and Daniel keep doing this work, this hard, ugly, necessary work of breaking patterns. She smiled through tears. Does that mean you'll let me come back? To your house? To your life? I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her skin was warm and young. Mine was thin and veined, the skin of someone who had washed too many dishes and held too many worries. I said gently, "It means that I will walk this road with you, slowly, carefully, with boundaries. I will not pretend your parents did not hurt me. I will not sit at their table again, but I won't make you choose between us. That is a cruelty I will not pass on." She burst into tears and leaned forward, almost spilling her tea as she clung to my hands. Thank you. I don't deserve. I cut her off. No one deserves grace, child. That's what makes it grace. We sat there for a long time, the two of us, with the sound of rain tapping on the window and the faint hiss of the radiator in the background. Slowly, her sobs quieted. Before she left, she stood at the door, holding on to the frame. "Amma, can I ask you one last thing?" "Of course." "If we ever have a daughter, will you help me raise her differently so she doesn't grow up afraid of disappointing everyone?" My throat tightened. I will. I will tell her stories of mistakes and second chances, of people who changed even when everyone thought they never would. And I will tell her over and over that her worth does not live in anyone's wallet. Sarah nodded, tears shining in her eyes like tiny lanterns. As the door closed softly behind her, my phone buzzed on the table. A new message from Daniel. "Mama, how did it go?" I looked around my small, quiet apartment, feeling something shift deeply inside me. The space felt lighter, as if an old invisible weight had finally been set down. I typed back, "It went like most hard things do. Painful, necessary, hopeful."
Months passed, seasons turned. The trees outside my window changed their clothes, green to gold to bare branches scratching at the sky. Life settled into a new shape. Nadia and Victor did not come to see me. I did not go to them. We existed in a polite, distant orbit. At birthdays, they sent expensive gifts. I sent simple ones. At gatherings, we greeted each other with controlled smiles that never reached our eyes. We had become acquaintances who shared a grandchild. Yes, a grandchild. The first time I held her, she was wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, her tiny fingers curling around mine with surprising strength. Daniel's eyes shone with tears. Sarah watched me as if afraid I might disappear. "What will you call me?" I whispered, rocking the baby gently. "Whatever you want," Daniel said, his voice thick. "Nani is enough. Just Nani." The baby's head smelled of milk and that sweet, soft scent new life carries. Her eyelashes fluttered against her cheeks. In that moment, every fight, every wound, every harsh word faded into the background. I looked at her and made a silent promise. You will not grow up thinking love has a price. You will not carry the weight of debts you never agreed to. You will know that your worth is older and deeper than any bank account. One afternoon, when the baby was 6 months old, I was walking her slowly up and down the corridor in my building, her small body warm against my shoulder, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy, uncertain. I turned. Nadia stood a few steps below, one hand on the railing, the other clutching her handbag like a life raft. She wore no jewelry, no bold colors, just a simple gray shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She looked smaller. For a second, we stared at each other. The baby made a small sound and shifted in my arms. "I did not know you'd be here," Nadia said. I nodded. Daniel asked me to watch her while they went to the appointment. She looked at the baby and something in her face softened. The hard lines I remembered seemed less sharp. "May I?" she asked, voice trembling. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I shifted the baby into her arms. The baby gurgled and grabbed at Nadia's shawl. She laughed, a real laugh, not the brittle one I'd heard at the restaurant. "I grew up with nothing," she said suddenly, eyes fixed on the baby. "Dirt floors, empty plates. I swore my children would never know that feeling, never know what it's like to sleep hungry, to be looked down on." Her voice cracked. In trying to protect them from that, I turned money into a god and myself into a priestess. I thought if I controlled everything, if I paid for everything, I could keep them safe. I didn't realize I was building a cage. The baby patted her cheek with a chubby hand. Her tears fell onto the little yellow blanket. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she whispered. "I don't think I've earned it. The bank didn't care about my intentions when they froze our accounts. The tax office doesn't care how poor I once was. Consequences don't care about childhood stories." She looked up at me then, eyes red, face naked. "But I care," she said, "now, about what I've done. To my daughter, to you, to this little one's future. I can't change who I was, but maybe I can change who I am from here." The corridor was quiet, except for the faint hum of someone's television behind a closed door. I leaned against the wall, my knees suddenly weak. Karma doesn't come to destroy us. It comes to show us the cracks we refuse to see. What you do after that, that's your choice. Nadia nodded, cradling the baby close. "Do you think it's too late?" she asked. I looked at my granddaughter, at her eyes that had just begun to focus, at her hands that grabbed everything with equal innocence, shawl, hair, necklace, finger.
For her? I said. Not if we start now. For a moment, we simply stood there. Two women with very different histories, holding the future between us. I won't forget what you did, Nadia. The envelope, the words, the way you looked at me like I was something to be handled and hidden. Her shoulders slumped. I know. But I also won't ignore what you're doing now. Standing here without your armor, without excuses. That counts for something. A small, fragile hope crossed her face. Can we start over? Not as friends, not yet, but as two grandmothers who don't want to repeat our parents' mistakes. I thought of my mother who had died worrying about bills. I thought of hers probably doing the same. Generations of women carrying fear in their bones. Yes, I said quietly. We can start somewhere. She smiled then, a real, tired, human smile. Later that night, after they had all gone home and my apartment was quiet again, I sat by the window with a cup of tea between my palms. Outside, the city lights blinked like tired eyes. I thought about wealth. Not the numbers logged in banks, not the cards that swipe or fail, not the houses or cars or watches. Real wealth, I realized, is being able to sit in your own skin without shame, to tell the truth about who you were and who you are becoming, to love people without owning them, to give without turning your gift into a chain. I had money. Yes, I had for a long time. But that wasn't what made me rich. What made me rich was the son who now looked at me with new respect. The daughter-in-law willing to break a lifetime of silence. The grandchild who would grow up hearing a different kind of story. In the end, here is what I learned and what I want you to carry with you if you've listened as far. Money reveals people. It does not change them. The ones who were kind before remain kind with a full wallet. The ones who were cruel only have more tools. So judge people not by what they spend or what they give, but by how they treat those who cannot repay them, by how they behave when no one is watching, by the dignity they offer even to those they think have nothing. I was once the woman everyone thought was poor. Then I was the woman who turned out to be rich. Now I am simply a woman at peace. And truly, my child, that is the greatest wealth of all. What came next in our lives wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for someone like me who spent years hiding her truth, that was the sweetest justice karma could give.